Well, I'm delighted to be joined by James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary. Can you hear me, Mr. Cleverly?
I can indeed. I can indeed.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us this morning. Look, there's some tales in the papers today which suggest a degree of Tory sleaze. We've got Boris Johnson's finances once again under scrutiny. We've got Nadhim Zahawi in this strange position of having to pay a fine of more than £1 million to HMRC while he was briefly Chancellor. Also in the week, we've had the Prime Minister fined for not wearing a seatbelt in the back of the car. It's not been a great week for the government, has it?
Well, I think that most people would recognise that the Prime Minister failing to wear his seatbelt was a small error whilst he was recording a video about a very important announcement for government funding to some of the most deprived parts of the UK. And with regard to Nadhim Zahawi, I think it's worth remembering that the whole reason that that we are having a discussion is because he has been a very successful entrepreneur who built a business from nothing, employing hundreds of people, possibly even 1,000 or more people, and has successfully contributed to the British economy. And he paid tax, the business paid tax, his employees paid tax. And HMRC said that he was careless in the administration of his tax affairs, but he is now fully up to date with the taxes that he owes.
Should he sack his accountant, or should he be sacked then?
Well, I don't know any more details than what he has already put in the public domain. I don't think it would be right or proper for me to speculate or guess about any further details about his tax affairs. But he has been a successful entrepreneur, building a company which has paid tax, employing people who have paid taxes, and he has himself paid tax, a considerable amount, because he's been successful.
But the Prime Minister hasn't sort of spoken up in support of him. So is he still secure in his position as party chairman?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has been supportive of him. And I think it's worth, he is in that role because he has demonstrated, as I say, not just that he's been a very successful businessman, but we should remember he was the head of the vaccine task force, which was about the rollout.
Well, he's a successful businessman, but he's not been a very successful politician, has he? Because he's marred in controversy now.
No, I think quite the opposite. I think his time as vaccine minister actually demonstrated that the experience that he developed in business and in other ministerial roles was useful.
Do you have confidence in him as party chairman?
Well, look, appointments to the government in whatever capacity are for the Prime Minister. It's not for me to start acting out as if I were the... Look, I'm not going to start play acting being Prime Minister. The Prime Minister has appointed his cabinet. It's for the Prime Minister to decide how long any of us stay in his role. Now, as I
so are you not backing him, just to be clear?
What I'm saying is I'm not going to play act being Prime Minister. It is for the Prime Minister to decide whether I or anyone else remains in his cabinet.
You mentioned the Levelling Up Fund there. 2/3 of the money have gone to Tory seats. Is this about levelling up, or is it about shoring up the Tories' finances in constituencies because you're worried about losing the next general election?
When you say that, it's worth remembering that the majority of constituencies in the country, by definition, are Conservative-held constituencies, including after the 2019 general election, a significant number of constituencies who are who have for decades been economically struggling. Some of the poorer constituencies and some of the poorer communities in this country, they turned to the Conservatives because they had felt that for too long, particularly under Labour governments, they were ignored and overlooked. So it is absolutely right and proper that we rebalance how we distribute money around the country so that those poor communities
aren't poor people saying, Mr. Cleverly, that they're taxed too much? I mean, I understand what you're doing with regard to levelling up in particular seats, but we've got some polling in the Telegraph this morning which suggests that 49% of the public think the tax burden is too high, and that when they're asked who they should trust on improving the economy, 49% think Labour, just 23% think the Tories. So the Tories have lost their mantle as a low-tax party. Doesn't that worry you as a committed party man?
Well, of course, all of us would like to bring taxes down. The Prime Minister has said he would like to bring taxes down, but we've got to do it at a point in time when it is right. And for those people who are suffering under the delusion that a Labour government would bring taxes down, I think need to be reminded of what the lessons of history have taught us all. The Conservatives put taxes up when we have to in order to make sure the economic situation is stable. Labour put up taxes whenever they think they can get away with it. That is the difference between an inherently low-tax party like mine and an inherently high-tax party like the Labour Party. No, not at all. Of course, it's the most sensible thing in the world. No, of course it's the most sensible thing in the world.
But there was a suggestion from the Prime Minister that only an idiot wouldn't understand the current global headwinds and call for tax cuts, even though we know from the Bank of England Governor, Andrew Bailey, that there is some more fiscal headroom. There's 11 billion more fiscal headroom than we thought we had. So why can't people at least expect for some of the tax rises that are scheduled in April to be cancelled?
We will always make economic decisions that we believe are in the best interest of the people of this country. The tax level that we put in place is to make sure that we're able to fund the public services that we all rely upon. But in every part of our decision making, we, uniquely in British politics at the moment, when you look at the attitude of the Lib Dems, the SNP, the Labour Party, all of whom are inherently, instinctively, tribally high tax parties, we tax at the level that we need to provide for public services and no more. And when there are the opportunities to ease the tax burden on those hardworking families, we seek to do so. That is in stark difference to those inherently high tax parties that might form a government in the future if people don't recognise the importance of the work we're doing to rebalance the economy.
We look forward to taxes at some point coming down. Foreign Secretary James Cleverly, thank you so much for joining me this morning.